Hello, everybody, and welcome to our World Today, the conversation looking at the Unionist perspective of the current news and anything that's topical that we believe we can shed a spotlight on from a Unionist perspective and explore the truth at the core of those news articles. So thank you for joining us. Thank you to the team for being here. I'm going to open it up to the team and find out from you guys which topic you believe stood out the most for you, and we can take it from there.
Yeah. So today we're talking about it's kind of a special because we're talking about things around climate change and sustainability in several topics. And I think the coolest one was probably something that we've been talking about for a few weeks right now, and it's the seaweed bricks. Basically the housing made of seaweeds, cement, and I thought it was pretty cool. And I rewatched the video today and I realized, hey, this is a problem that is there not only in the United States and Mexico, but it's all over the Caribbean too. We have sargasso, which is the seaweed that is produced, and basically we don't know what to do with it. And as the video said, it smells. It's not really nice for beaches, specifically when you have a lot of tourism. It's not quite agreeable to have that. And in high peaks of sargasso, from the ocean, we have to remove them every few hours, and it's impossible, basically. And so I am curious what you think about that, because I have several feelings about it. First of all, sargasso is made from water being warmer and warmer, and so the currents are producing more and more seaweed that is going on the west side of the Atlantic Ocean, and that's why it's impacting all of North and North America and the Caribbean, which is the barrier that Central America has. So it doesn't enter the sea, but it's all of the Caribbean is affected by it too. So obviously there's a problem there about climate change. And then on the other side, it's pretty cool to see hey, we can actually replace cement. And the guy, Oscar, I think, proclaims that, with good structure, the house can sustain hurricane season. So especially for poor people, it's quite nice probably to have this type of housing, and it's a positive cycle of production that could replace, the current cement in some cases. And it could even be traded in several parts of the world, things like that. So I don't know, I feel it's pretty cool. But obviously there's something deep there. I wonder what's the thing, because sargasso has been a flea, something it's really I don't know, it's a problem. It's a real issue that we've had for about a decade now. And I guess how do we prevent it, in addition to supporting this initiative of using it for a positive benefit?
Yeah, that's a good question. That's what I was thinking about it too, because the root causes of it, like climate change, exacerbating it, because I guess it grows better in warmer waters, and also the loss of nitrogen from agricultural runoff, like from fertilizers that go into the water and everything. It's those would be the root issues that you would actually have to address. But you know what they're doing right now in that Sarga Block company in Mexico is just starting like right where you are, and just like I see it as taking, like, I guess talking about it in terms of like a spiritual journey, like just looking at the lowest hanging fruit and just picking it, you know. And yeah, and I guess the seaweed is like that for them, except it's the lowest lying like vegetable. Really, it's not a low hanging fruit. So, but yeah, just harvesting it and using it to create building materials, to me, that feels really divine. Like it's a very divine, intelligent thing to do. Like it's very purposeful. I don't know. And I feel like that guy, Oscar, who founded it, I don't remember his last name, who founded the company, he talked about it in terms of like his journey in life, where his family immigrated to the US and they were really poor and struggled in the US and moved back to Mexico eventually. And that a lot of people go through that. And he talked about Sarga Block as being like a way to turn your focus toward your country and toward creating opportunities in your country, instead of like always seeking the opportunities in another country, which some people might be called to go on the immigration journey. Some people might be called to create some opportunity in the country they're in. And so I thought that was cool because of how he saw it, you know. Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, I think it's good that what he's doing, I think, is amazing, that he's just utilizing this kind of problem and making a solution from it, you know. But yeah, the better thing would be, you know, to cool our oceans and not have it at all, you know, or like reduce it. So yeah, well, we just have to solve climate change, you know. That's really what we need to do.
Yeah.
But this is I think this is a good good solution to what's happening right now, because you can't like, it's not going to change overnight, you know. But yeah.
So I did find the article quite interesting, but also found what you shared, Doreen, around the fact that it's produced in warmer waters. That I don't recall hearing that in the video, so I'm not sure. But yeah, I didn't make that connection. So I think it's quite cool that where they are, because let's be honest, generally where you find that type of seaweed is probably, and like if I speak about the South African coastline, it's probably also areas that have been affected in terms of flooding and those kind of things. And so, you know, to have something that, as you say, comes out of a global warming scenario that's recycled and repurposed to serve a greater need, sounds like you know, a great response from nature to the call for housing, to the call for humanity to have something that's more sustainable than chopping down trees and things like that to start building housing and things like that. So I think there's a, you know, like, yes, we don't like the idea that it stemmed out of global warming, but I do love the idea that something that we thought and is generally considered to be a disaster has resulted in some ingenuity. And I feel like that's kind of testament to the human spirit taking the adversity and, as you said, Sage, creating something divine out of it. And for us, I think that as Unionists, we definitely find that in the way our healing works. We take something that's an upset, that's very uncomfortable potentially, and bringing love into that space allows you to find the gift, to find the lesson, to find the growth. And so there's definitely a parallel here in terms of somebody responding to a call from the universe to say, okay, so you have done this, but this is what I'm providing. Use it in another way. Find almost serving a purpose, serving his purpose. You know, so I feel like there's a strong spiritual growth element to it that we also need to remember in terms of how this guy has taken something that has literally been an eyesore on the coastline, not only from a picture point of view, but from a hygiene point of view. Because I remember something saying that it creates quite an awful smell because it's quite sulfurous. And so, you know, I just think that there's definitely a nice lesson in using the adversity of the situation to create a powerful solution that's probably quite sustainable, given that those same seaweed bricks can be repurposed and they can be ground down if they tend to break or things like that, to be reset into new bricks. They are said to be a lot sturdier, so they can actually withstand some harsh climate conditions. So I think there's a nice message in how he's taken what would have been seen as adversity and probably a natural kind of disaster situation and repurposed it to actually solve a challenge that parts of humanity are facing at the moment.
I quite like you guys' responses to a question, and I have to agree with you. I feel also that what if this kind of initiative is really like, it really feels divine, as Sage said. And so when it feels divine, it feels like it gives to everyone. And there's like no real losers, no one that it takes from. And so what if this initiative is supported to the point where maybe it starts replacing real cement everywhere. And so then the cost of producing cement diminishes. And so by using seaweed cement, because I kind of remember like in other coasts part of the world, like different kinds of seaweed that produce high sulfur and are kind of dangerous and not really good for the environment are also produced and also drift ashore. You know, what if we use them and it feels like Oscar has found a way to produce them in a way that doesn't really produce much energy either. And the seaweed in themselves are resources of energy. So if we use them for more things and in a more global way, like we can use that to even not only prevent that this could be like a physical consequence of global warming, but also like it can be like a slowdown and reverse of global warming in the fact that the sector of cement would be like completely changed. And so that would feel kind of cool because there are like quite a few coastlines in the world that have, you know, similar problems. So like, yeah, it's just like, it would feel cool. And if it's coupled with a technology that, makes it so that it's solid for hurricanes and also for earthquakes, for example, or for flooding. If it can be strengthened with other material, like all the better. Yeah, it would be nice to see how it expands, but like it's definitely cool to see the lowest hanging fruit, and I hope that it keeps reaching for the lowest hanging fruit, because he's definitely right about the fact that sometimes in your own country, in your own region, especially region from the third world or tropical region, we have a lot of resources, but we don't use them. And the fact that is starting to use them and like really having the ingenuity of like knowing how to expand it feels really good. Like it's like his role modeling for other people in this part of the world and really anywhere. So it's cool.
Yeah, and I like the fact that he also has identified that he can do something to serve his country. So as opposed to living in the upset of having had to relocate, had to immigrate, he's actually gone back and said, hey, I can do something here. I can make life better here. So not only is he contributing to cleaning up the coastline, he's also contributing to probably quite affordable housing, which is probably also a significant challenge in many parts of those countries. And if I had to go back and say, in South African rural areas, the huts are built from straw, grass, and those kind of things, laid into caked mud to create bricks as well. This kind of just adds to that type of solution and probably will allow for greater expansion of the provision of affordable housing to many underprivileged and underdeveloped areas in certain parts of South Africa and probably in certain parts of Africa. And considering that there's if you think about it, a significant component of our coastline is in warm water, and the other, it's literally almost half and half. So half is very much the Indian Ocean, and the other half is, and I mustn't get my geography wrong here, the Atlantic Ocean. So, I think it just serves quite a purpose to just show that those two different streams and currents could provide various solutions on either side of the coastline of South Africa.
Yeah, I know. I love how it could be applied to so many places. And also one detail I really wanted to share with people is how the seaweed blocks are insulators. They are temperature insulators. So they keep the interior of a house warmer in the winter and cooler in the summer, which I thought was really cool. And also another part of why this is so divine, I feel like it's kind of symbolic because the seaweed is generated from some sort of climate or environmental issues, definitely probably big farming and maybe climate change as well. And it's generated from that, but then it kind of, the bricks you can make from the seaweed ameliorates the impact of climate extremes. That's really, that's kind of beautiful and poetic, this very symbolic thing,
Yeah.
That's cool.
It also makes me think too, because we have so many natural resources. If people thought more like Oscar, or just we're thinking how can we use the resources we have and like innovate with them. And you know, like there is definitely, there has to be many ways that we can solve the issues we're having with climate change with the resources, the natural resources we have.
Yeah.
Everyone needs to think more like Oscar.
Yeah.
That's
Yeah, because he's not so set in his ways. Like all these big like companies in the world, they're like, seaweed, I'm not changing production to seaweed blocks. You know, we've been doing cement for 100 years and I'll never change. And then Oscar is like very open-minded and doesn't feel like it's a threat to him to innovate and think outside the box and go through trial and error. And so that's the kind of mentality you need.
yeah.
Oscar makes me think of the first lesson of life purpose class. It's like, yeah, it's so inspiring and to see in action. Because it's just like lowest hanging fruit, as we said. And it's like Isaiah said, it's so simple. Like we have so many resources that we're not using. For example, like geothermia or geothermy. I don't remember how to say it in English, but it's like basically the energy made from the source of volcanoes. And we have those in many, many parts of the world. And it's kind of hard to do all the electrical system based on geothermia or like warm a lot of things based on geothermia. But what if you use it for one factory so you don't have to build a whole resource? And so you concentrate it on one factory, and this factory you use, for example, you use the energy of like the heat of the geothermia to produce hydrogen instead of like usable hydrogen, instead of like using it with like carbon or something. Like you figure out something and then you use that hydrogen to power electricity, but also planes. Like this could be the lowest hanging fruit, like the link that is missing between like this is too costly or difficult to change, and what Oscar is doing is basically like, hey, I'm doing something that feels divine because it's for everyone, and it feels so simple, but at the same time so life-changing. So it's such a small thing. And he began it was by himself and his family, and now he has like, I don't know how many employees. So yeah, it's pretty cool to see that. And from this mentality, I think like we can birth a lot of things, many, many things. And I think it's cool as well that Sage mentioned how it can regulate temperature, because that's also one of the impacts of global warming that we've been suffering from the most, from like having really hot temperatures some days, sometimes some weeks during summers, and also having like more and more fires. And so, yeah, it feels like we are searching for solutions to regulate the temperatures in a way that feels best for us. And obviously, like not everyone in the world like has AC built in the houses. It's not always in the culture. So yeah, it's just I think like it's cool to explore some other things. And I think like the next topic that we're going to explore is one of the responses that we could use, like aside from the seaweed blocks, to have sustainable housing and housing that is comfortable for everyone, even the people that are the most poor, the poorest people. and this innovation is like using white paint to save energy or to cool down a house. And that's also something that Sage shared with us in an article. And I think the Indian slums are using it basically to cover their roofs and, cooling down the houses, especially because like sometimes in the summer, it can get up to like more than 45 degrees Celsius or like 115 degrees Fahrenheit. So yeah, it feels like we have another solution that is pretty cool to look at and to use. And once again, it's born from such a simple initiative. And I wonder what you guys are thinking about that. And if you're seeing a pattern, like, because it feels like there's a lot of lessons to learn from the topics today.
So I think the one thing that does stand out for me is specifically the story speaks to very high temperatures in, as you said, the almost slum areas of India, where it's much more difficult for girls to go to school in that heat and come home to do their homework. It takes a lot. It's much more complicated for families to take care of themselves and give care to their kids under those temperatures. And this white solar reflective paint sounds like one of the simplest solutions. And if we think about it, we've always known that white is a color that generally reflects things. And so definitely the fact that they, and I recall in the article, one of the women in the article saying how proud she was of herself, that she could actually paint the roof herself. And it's simple things like that allow people to remember their own power and to feel empowered in the simplicity of the solution. And I feel like sometimes we overcomplicate life by looking for complicated solutions to simple problems. And so you have this simple solution that somebody actually gets a sense of pride that she could actually implement the solution herself. And I think that's really the power of the solution, and that's really what we look for as people. I would love to be part of my solution, not looking for somebody else to solve my problems for me. And again, it just speaks to the desire for healing. And I mean, this is literally on a much more physical level, but it's quite symbolic because psychologically that house is indicative of you as a whole being. And so for people to start taking such pride in just the simple solutions and finding their power again starts to speak volumes to healing that has probably been called in for a long, long time.
Yeah, I feel this is cool. You're definitely speaking to like people claiming their power. And it feels like nice, finally, because I remember when we started, sorry, I have something in my eye. I remember when we started Black Lives Matter and then continued on with like so many discussions and Soul Cafe and things like that. And most of the time we were talking about people were claiming their power. And now we're seeing solutions born from small initiatives, born in small like parts of city, like community centers, people that really want to serve the community, but serve the greater good by serving their community. And I really enjoy that. And I think it's a divine response and very human response to the fact that for so many years, we were looking at global warming. And it was like, we can do everything we can inside the house, but we have a problem because most of the energy that is consumed right now on Earth is made by big businesses, and we can do nothing for that if they don't want to change, if governments are not pushing for them and things like that. And right now it's just like, oh my God, like spiritually, physically, in terms of climate change, people are creating these small groups and small energy, and then it's growing, growing, growing. And from the inside out, they're changing our way of living on Earth. And I think it's just a testament to what we learn in Unionism. It's like first inside and then outside, and to not feel like powerless when it feels like it's too big for you, and to just take the step that you're going to take. And for us, for a long time, it was just talking about these things and healing, and maybe sometimes feeling like people weren't changing and making different choices. And for some people, it's serving their community and then like literally creating a miracle. And yeah, that's I think the spiritual lesson that we can get from this. I also remember when Sage shared the article, I actually thought of like a study. I think I said it in the chat, but I'm not sure. It's like a study that is studying the whitest paint. And this whitest paint is able to absorb light for a few seconds and reflect it inside a room for sometimes days to weeks, several weeks. And so it's like, again, like with white paint and the things that we have, we can do like a lot more than what we were imagining. And we can imagine that this whitest paint, for example, can be used in colder regions where it can like sustain light, brightness, I guess, but also heat, for example. And I find this so innovative, so cool yet again. It's like from the same resource. It's kind of like you're explaining that both powers of different oceans can be worked at together in South Africa to have a solution there. It's like both powers of the same resource can be worked at for different parts of the world yet again. So yeah. You guys have any thoughts about it?
Yeah, I just yeah, I think that's cool having the white roofing. And it makes me think about like where I'm from, like Arizona, like, it being so hot in the summers. Like a lot of places are just might be really hot in the summers, but they might like take traditions from like Europe, like places that were like colonized by Europeans might take these traditions. I feel like so many places in those parts of the world, like they tend to have like darker roofs, like in our apartment complex, for example, like the roofs are like a medium, like kind of dark color, and a lot of roofing is just like darker colored. And I'm just like, well, especially in Arizona, it just doesn't make sense. It's like, why are you covering houses with like these traditional, like dark gray, like dark brown ceramic shingles? Because like they're basically becoming a solar oven Like they're just absorbing all of this heat. And I just don't get it. Like, and again, like the pattern is like it takes people who are really in need of a solution and who feel most impacted by a negative climate trend, I guess, the greater heat, like they're more impacted by it. So they're like, what can we do to solve this? Because we're not pumping air conditioning into our houses that are like designed to be an oven. So you know what I mean? Like that's what I always saw.
The solution is
and-
so simple.
and
They
it- but it's
always
so
find these
simple.
easy solutions.
Yeah. Like, please just make our roofs light colored. Like this isn't Scandinavia where like you need like a pitched roof that's all black to like absorb all the sun in the long, cold, dark winters, you know? Like that's like a Northern European type of deal. Okay. Just a thought. It is. They're just like the roof is designed to catch the sun. And I'm just like, no, don't do that in Arizona. You know, they're not like super pitched roofs, but you know, don't do that.
Like when I'm listening to you, I do believe that there probably was a purpose to some of those things. Because I also know that in South Africa, at some point, houses were built with 3 layers of bricks in terms of putting up the walls and things like that, which then reduced to 2 layers of bricks. So with master builders, you kind of have we've in the past had a mold, and I think that mold probably served a purpose at some point. But obviously, as global warming has happened, as water has become scarcer in a lot of places, which we know water is generally used in cooling systems and things like that. It has required a level of innovation that probably has followed the trend in certain places, but not in others. So I agree with you. I mean, my house, for instance, is east facing. Whereas if you have a north-facing house, you have the afternoon sun kind of thing. So your house stays warm for longer. But if your house is east-facing or west-facing, your house generally becomes cooler faster. So it's all of those kind of things that we also need to take into consideration and realize why some of these things have shifted in that way. Because I can tell you now, when I bought my house, the last thing I was thinking about which direction it was facing. But if I had known, I might have considered getting a north-facing house. So, those kind of things are all things that you need to take into consideration. It's like, and also, living in a valley versus living higher up. There's a bigger challenge with water pressure and all sorts of those things like that. So, it's all those things that we start to learn through growing up, because literally you learn these lessons through growing up. When you're younger, that's the last thing you want to think about. And I think when humanity was younger and societies were younger, they wouldn't have necessarily solved for some of the challenges that we're needing to solve for now. But we are finding that because these challenges have now presented themselves, we're also finding a very ingenious response to some of these challenges, and in the simplest of ways, which is always the greatest way for us to have learned. It just is indicative that learning has actually taken place.
Love what you said there, Granville. I didn't think about that like there's these old molds and they did serve a purpose. There's a reason that things were built a certain way. Yeah, I don't know. I just didn't think about that. So that was cool. And then what else? I was just gonna say something else about that. I forget what I was gonna say. Darn it. It'll come back to me. I just lost it. Sorry.
Yeah, I think I have a next piece. I think it's like we have these molds of cultures. I know like in the south of the United States, it's super important for a lot of people to have this house that maybe resembles Spain or France or things like that. And I guess like the culture of looking at your heritage was something that was important for a lot of people. And I guess in that sense, like a country as a whole is doing growing up as well, because like the US has a lot to learn about maybe like sustainable housing and affordable housing, housing that can sustain earthquakes. Like the US can learn a lot from like Caribbean countries or like Japan in that space, and they're just starting to change. And so it really does take growing up, even for a country, to consider these things that weren't considered before, because it was like a fast-paced, fast-growing environment that served in the development of the US and was good too. But now like it's just about, I guess, looking at what matters now and what side of culture do we need, and what do we need to evolve with, what can we change, like a new type of culture that an environment like we can create literally. So yeah, I think it's cool to see it, this growing up in the consciousness of countries too. It's like yeah, you're not alone, like even though sometimes you're 25 and sometimes you're 60 and you're still growing up, you're still learning things, and a country is like 300 years, and granted it takes a long time for them to change and consciousness to really change, because there are a lot of people and it's very complex, but like you can still see the different choices, I guess, the evolution in there. And yeah, Isaiah.
I remember, and then it had a little bit to do with what you were saying too, Marie. It's just, I really feel like it's just not a willingness to change, like we see that we were doing things this way, but we really need a different solution now. We need something different. And it's very easy to see that when something different's needed, it's just that you have to change. You have to be willing to change. Like what you were saying earlier with the big companies.
Yeah.
Like Oscar's not a big company, so he was willing to change. And yeah, like these bigger corporations have to be willing to change, or there has to be pressure on them if they won't. But yeah.
I also think that it's nice that we're seeing this level of adaptability. We are adapting to literally in both of these stories. There's a high level of adaptability in humanity and in accepting that something needs to change in the first place, and then responding to that call for that change. And it's literally probably the core of any real learning, and the core of any real healing is the actual desire to change and to accept that new responses may be required to older problems, and newer responses are required to newer problems. And sometimes those new solutions could probably solve long-standing older problems if we were open to considering them. So it's literally this, literally this desire for openness to find appropriate solutions. And it's something that we've probably spoken to across various topics over the years, is that desire to be open to what's happening so that you can find, one, the lesson, two, the healing, three, the next leg of your journey, that all of these things start to feel significantly more and more interconnected, because the lesson will present itself in one way or another.
For sure. And I think on that, I kind of need to talk about a topic that is, I guess, less joyous and less cool. Not because we need to balance the good and the bad, but because there is probably a sector of global warming and global crisis that is less tended to in general than others, and it's like the management of water and water crisis. And sometimes you have water crisis even in rich countries. And I think this topic has a lot of layers, and this topic is about like Uruguay and the water crisis there, and the fact that the capital city and most of the country doesn't have water running in taps and in their houses, sometimes for weeks on end, and they have to get 2 liters of water per person distributed sometimes per day. And in this mix of that is already something that is prone to like creating tension. You have Google that is opening a data center in Uruguay, and data center to cool down the computers need cold water distributed consistently to the site of a data center. And so not only is it like a very like it consumes a lot of energy in terms of electricity, but also water. And in that mix, people are starting to get, I guess, angry and upset, and they started protesting against Google and the fact that Google is like robbing water from their houses. And so I was wondering, does Google is not, the data center is not finished, it seems. So basically and obviously, we don't know how it's going to go, like in a country in crisis, would like a source of water be favored to go directly to Google, or would it be the same as everywhere else in the country, and like basically would need to follow the water turns? And also, like, is Google really I guess the enemy there for people, or is this protest the spiritual, emotional, and physical representation of an upset and tension that was already there in the country? And so these are 2 complex questions, but it does feel like it was a multi-layered cake from the get-go. So how do you guys feel about the situation in Uruguay?
So I kind of feel I feel like you, in your question, you answered your question. So the layeredness of the upset is very much the thing that stands out. Because if we consider that a company like Google would probably bring an increase in the level of employment in some way or another, but then also that in bringing something, there's also the perception of something being taken away because of the fact that there are water shortages. If there weren't water shortages, they would probably celebrate Google's presence in the country. So I feel like it's like a kind of bit of a two-edged sword. So we're driving progress, but almost driving progress at a certain level of cost. And I like Google's response in going back to the drawing board in terms of reviewing the cooling solution for their data center, which is probably quite a healthy response from them, considering the potential size of the investment in bringing their data center to Uruguay in the first place. So, you know, there's a layeredness to the upset, but there's also nice considered facets to trying to find a solution, because yes, people are suffering in the sense that they are being rationed with water. You then have you have Google requiring so much water, but they're saying, okay, let us put our plan on hold. Let us understand the dynamics at play here and potentially consider a different solution. So it almost starts to speak to not progress at all costs, which we've seen in other situations before.
Yeah, I agree. I feel like the solution is for people to like know that they're valuable, I guess, and to understand that like, yeah, like progress at all costs isn't really progress. If people are really aware of that, they know that this is about everyone, and there's no such thing as like Google coming in and doing whatever they want, regardless of, you know, well, doing whatever they want while people feel powerless to them. And then Google benefits a lot, and then the people don't, and it doesn't matter. That's not actually how it happens. Like, maybe Google might be more aware, and the people might be getting more aware that like something should be mutually beneficial in all ways, and it shouldn't be a cost to them. Because I think a lot of the time people probably feel like, well, if it's Google and people with a lot of money, they can pretty much do whatever they want, and they kind of have the government bought because, you know, the government has an interest in like whatever, like collecting whatever taxes they can from the businesses that move in, or more investment. But yeah, I think that people might be becoming aware that doesn't have to be how things work. I don't know. Yeah.
I feel like I want to concentrate on the people too. And I feel like, you know, this region, like very, very close to Argentina, very close in consciousness too, geographically and things like that. And there are a lot of crises and there's a lot of poverty. And if you can understand that, I think you can understand what's going on in there right now. And people are feeling abandoned by their governments on several levels. And I think that speaks to the fact that there's so much anger in a situation where the data center isn't even open yet. Won't be open for years maybe, but it's already like provoking this type of tension, and maybe like it's a way for people to communicate their discontent with the situation that they have there. And so there is a lot to heal about feeling vulnerable. Also, obviously, like in the world, we have a lot of resentment against wealthy people when we're healing poverty. So I guess the fact that Google was like, it was a timing basically, but the fact that Google was installing their production as the water shortage was going on, I guess it triggered this sentiment of injustice and not being safe and abandoned wounds, I guess, in people. And so there is a lot of healing to be had there, probably a lot of compassion to be had. I wonder, like, what can be done, because when we talk about it, when I see it, people will have a tendency to see it as, oh, like we need to have that physical solution, but I see like a spiritual problem. And so I wonder, like, how can we help people in that sense that they take back their power in the way that we've seen in Mexico and India in the past few weeks and months. And obviously, like, the situation in Mexico and India is not perfect, but there's something there. And so I wonder if, like, there probably will be something if someone says yes to that divine intervention that feels like it can be an innovation for everyone involved. Just like we didn't think that Sargasso was something that we could heal on our own because it's like literally the elements that the ocean against us, and we don't have enough arms and enough hours in the day to get rid of it, get rid of the seaweed. And then we realized that we can do something about it. And yeah, I just wonder what can be done there. Because like water is the cause of like so many conflicts in the world. And we haven't found a true solution to it nowhere. Like the relevant conflicts in Switzerland for it, not in the same space, obviously, because there is no water shortage, but it's different. And like, yeah, it definitely feels like there's more healing there to be had.
So it's interesting that you actually brought that up, because, you know, as you were talking, it's just like it's feeling into it, and it kind of feels like two responses to a relationship with struggle. So within the first two stories, there is a sense of something that could have created a struggle, but a choice to heal so that the solution actually alleviates the struggle. Whereas with Uruguay, it's kind of like, it's the opposite response. It's like literally that sense of powerlessness that has probably fueled the struggle a little bit, because of the fact that it's such a required, water is such a required resource. And it's a sense of struggling and a sense of almost having a relationship with lack. And on the one hand, we had the housing story with seaweed. Yes, there's a housing shortage, sustainable housing is a requirement. And there's literally the sense that, oh, but I can use this and create that and solve that. Whereas on the other end, it's like, well, this is a problem, and we're kind of almost at loggerheads with each other for who gets the resource. So it's definitely two sides of the coin of healing here, where you can literally see a much healthier response because some healing has taken place, versus a less healthy response because more healing is required.
I kind of wonder too, like, if the Google data center could use more like passive cooling techniques, like how like, for example, like I'm sure they have insulation there. You know, I'm sure that the building obviously would be insulated and everything, but I don't know, it makes me wonder if they can use more passive cooling, like one of the things that we talked about before with the school in rural India, a school for girls in rural India.
So we have reached our hour, so I think we're gonna probably need to extend the discussion around this water solution further. So yeah, I just thank you to everybody for our conversation today. Thank you to everybody that's followed us. Please also feel free to like and subscribe to our Church of Union YouTube channel. And we will see all of you next week. Thank you, everybody. Bye-bye.